on his way. Devil is on his way. Devil is on his way, motherfucker. The devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way. Fall to your knees. Devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way.
Mountain Murders is an Appalachian true crime podcast. Some content may not be suitable for all listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
We say fuck a lot. Hey, y'all. Welcome back to Mountain Murders. I'm Heather.
And I'm Dylan.
How are you?
I'm doing good.
You always say that.
Yeah, I feel great.
Well, you said you were well rested.
I am well rested. I feel good.
You had your 20 hours of sleep?
I didn't sleep for 20 hours.
Are you sure?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
Exactly.
Possibly. Yeah, so here we are. It's been beautiful weather lately. Yeah.
Are we talking about the weather?
Yeah, we're rolling into getting near summertime, right?
Every time you talk about the weather, it makes me feel middle-aged.
Well, you know, we have to worry about these things.
Like, I love a good, comfortable season.
Yeah, you have to talk about the weather, you know, whether or not they're fixing that drain, that storm drain down the road that's been flooding out your garden.
Too much, Dylan. I learned an interesting and fun fact today.
Oh, yeah.
Would you like me to share it with you?
Please.
In 1974, Walter Cronkite declared Knoxville, Tennessee, the streaking capital of the world.
Wow. I did not know that anyone went for that title.
There was something like 5,000 UT, the volunteers, UT students, who streaked in Knoxville down Cumberland Avenue in 1974.
That's a lot of people. That's a lot of naked people.
I want to bring streaking back.
You think that it should be a bigger part of our society?
It would be fun, right? That's how we blow off some steam. You're like Frank the Tank. You just strip down, streak through like a public place, like the Taco Bell drive-thru.
Would you do that? You're going to go through the quad? Go running through the quad?
I mean, I'm probably not going to do it now, but if I lost 60 pounds, maybe.
Yeah, I don't think I could ever do that.
But I feel like other people should do that.
Oh, yeah?
Why not?
So you just want to see random naked people running around?
I might run naked through certain spots, right?
I don't even want to be naked in the bathroom by myself, so I'm not going to do that out in public.
Really.
Okay, so...
Okay, well, I was just trying to make the world a more fun place.
Well, I think it would make it interesting, right? Everyone would have a story to tell, right?
Guess what I saw?
A naked person running down by the KFC.
Yes.
Before we go any further, before I forget, I would like to thank today's sponsor of this episode of Mountain Murders, who gave so generously at patreon.com/Mountain Murders Podcast.
Wow, you got it right.
Yes.
Yes.
I had to write it down for a few days, and I finally learned it.
That's awesome.
And you as well, if you would like extra content and an ad-free experience on all episodes, you can go there and generously donate as little as $1 or $3 and get access to all kinds of extra content and our Discord chat. Ginger Snaps is today's sponsor.
Thanks for bringing us the show today, Ginger Snaps.
Thank you, Ginger. Love the name.
Okay, Dylan, are you ready?
All right, people's probably like, why are they being so random and just talking about nothing?
Because that's just how my brain works.
Well, this, I must say, today is a very heavy episode.
Before we get started, I want to warn listeners that today's show is a tough one. We are traveling down to Alabama this month, and we are covering a case that is a dark, twisted tale of perversion in working-class neighborhoods and in the piney backwoods of Alabama. We will be discussing child abuse and pedophilia. I know those are very troubling topics. If that's not your bag, you don't want to listen to that, it's triggering, upset you, you might want to skip this episode.
Yeah, and that's fine. We'll catch you next time.
Right. With that being said, Dylan, the time has come.
This is a heavy case. This has troubled me.
This case has intrigued me for so long. I am looking forward to discussing this with you.
I am as well, but like I said, it's very hard. A lot of people have dealt with trauma and stuff in their life.
No, it's absolutely, just researching it, I'll be honest, after I read the episode, I was in a bit of a funk for a couple of days.
Yeah, when I did my
Kinda
homework,
sent me in a little spiral.
you sent me my things to watch and read, and I was just I was blown away by the magnitude of the case. And it starts out one way, and then it goes into a completely different direction, and that is just pure darkness. So I guess without further ado, let's jump into this.
Brittney Nicole Wood was born on September 25th of 1992 in Mobile, Alabama, to parents Wallace Hankey and Chessie Wood. She had an older brother, Derek, and later a younger brother. So she was the only daughter born to Chessie. Brittany's mother described them as buddies, having a close relationship. They did everything together while Brittany was growing up. Very close. In the docuseries Monsters in the Shadows, which is on the Peacock streaming app, one of my resources for today, Chessie Wood told interviewers she was a young mother, but not a dumb mother. She was cautious about who was allowed to watch her children and entrusted their care to family members. She said, quote, "If you can't trust your family, who can you trust? Looking back, they probably would have been safer at the crack house."
Well, and I think that's the best way to be. You always consider who you're leaving your children with, and always want them to be safe and secure, right?
Absolutely. Brittany grew up in a tight-knit family. She was close with her aunts and uncles. It was the kind of family where cousins were more like siblings to Brittany. She was described as an awesome but scrappy girl. It didn't matter that Brittany was a slight, petite young woman. She would throw down with anybody, her cousin said.
Yeah, by all accounts, she seems to be a spitfire, right?
She also loved children and babies. If Brittany was at a family function and there was a new baby, she would make a beeline for that baby. I think we know people like that. I'm one of those people.
Well, they love children, and they just have, it's like they typically have a way with children, right? The kids gravitate towards them as well.
I love a little baby.
You like little squishies?
You cannot beat that new baby smell.
Oh, no, it's so sweet.
Babies are precious. Okay. In 2003, Brittany was 11 years old when she went to the after-school director at a local Baptist church and said someone was touching her inappropriately. Brittany was afraid to tell the police, but wanted the abuse to stop. She went on to say it was her maternal grandmother's boyfriend, a 53-year-old man named Ronald Robertson. The man, Brittany confessed, had been molesting her for 2 years. Law enforcement was contacted. When Robertson was questioned about the allegations, he denied everything. Eventually, enough evidence was found to charge him with sexual abuse and assault. In 2005, Robertson was taken to trial and given 25 to life for abusing Brittany Wood.
Wow, for once, an acceptable sentence for such a heinous crime.
And Brittany was only 12 when she testified at the trial, which is very tough, especially for a child.
Typically, they try to avoid a trial in these cases, and a lot of times that leads to a plea deal that people think is too light or not enough for this type of crime. But oftentimes it is this very thing, that keeping the victims off of the witness, off the stand, and having to go over this trauma in public, in a public setting, because sometimes that can re-traumatize a victim.
Well, she told the jury every detail, saying often he would ask her to go get him some water and bring it back into his bedroom. He would then force her to take her clothes off and would proceed to sexually abuse her. It was to be difficult as a child. It has to be, difficult as a child to sit in the courtroom and tell strangers what happened, especially when the abuser is sitting only a few feet away.
Yeah, they're right there. Oftentimes they can still intimidate and scare the witness. And it takes so much guts.
So kudos to Brittany. Even as a little girl, as you said, she was a spitfire. Her cousin said she was very scrappy. I think this just sort of speaks to Brittany's character, that she was tough.
Yeah, and according to her mother, she wanted to do this to protect others, to get this person off the street, to protect others from having to go through what she went through. Because molestation is horrible, right? It's top three horrible: murder, rape, molestation. But this type of extended abuse over months, even years, to me is even more horrifying.
Robertson made a statement in court saying he had raised Chessie and Brittany as he had dated the grandmother for over 14 years and apologized. He said, quote, "I love these kids like they were my own." Yet, most people wouldn't apologize for something they didn't do, right?
Well, that's true. And sometimes sorry just doesn't cut it. And I think this is one of those situations.
He attempted to appeal the sentence, but it was upheld. Robertson is serving time at the Fountain Correctional Center in Alabama.
Oh,
Today.
good. That's where he should be.
Brittany told friends she had constant nightmares about the abuse she suffered. She lived with the trauma for years. By 2012, 19-year-old Brittany was a mother. Her 2-year-old daughter, Peyton, seemed to be a bright spot in Brittany's troubled life. Our story really begins in late February or early March of 2012, when Brittany's maternal uncle, Randall Scott Wood, went to law enforcement with a troubling admission. On February 26th of 2012 is the date that I could find. So some details said late February, some say early March, but one date said February 26th, so we're going to go with that. Scott was a former National Guardsman and had only recently returned to Alabama to take a job working at a city steel mill. He had moved in with his sister Wendy and her husband Donald Holland. Now, according to Chessie, her brother Scott had contacted law enforcement after finding messages and imagery on the Holland family computer. One of the messages read, and this is very troubling, Dylan.
This is sick.
"You give a good blowjob for 12-year-old."
I mean, who could even wrap their mouth around those words? Seriously.
And there's a lot of players involved in this story. So as I mentioned, we've got Chessie, that's Brittany's mom. Her uncle is Scott, and then Wendy is their sister. And she also has a twin named Mindy. So we'll be talking about these relatives. I just want to kind of make sure everybody has the family tree straight.
So Brittany's mom, Scott, Mindy, and Wendy are all siblings.
Yes.
Brothers and sisters.
And then we'll come into play in the story. Now, there's some conflicting information. On the docuseries, Chessie portrays her brother Scott as like a good guy who came forward with this news. She said, quote, "He had been playing detective for months." He immediately left the Holland home and moved into Chessie's after reporting the abuse. However, it's fucking troubling, Dylan, because Scott also admitted to police that not only was he concerned that members of the Holland household had been abusing the minor who was only 13 at the time, but he had also been involved with the child sexually.
Now, here's where it gets, this story is I will double check with Heather a few things to keep it straight in my mind and to help everyone else keep it straight. Because it's kind of complicated with all the overlaps.
There is a lot.
There's a lot.
Unpack with the story. So yeah, we'll try to keep the relatives kind of outlined so it's not too complicated. Do you have anything else to add, Dylan?
No, I'm just here for the story.
Okay. So Scott has also been sexually abusing this child. But apparently he's fallen in love with this minor and feels like he needs to go to police and report that other people are abusing her.
So he's abusing her as well, but now he wants to protect her from other abusers.
Right.
Okay.
According to Scott, Donnie and Wendy Holland, along with others, had been sexually abusing their children. Scott wanted to strike a deal, and he began cooperating with law enforcement. Of course, this launched an investigation about child sex abuse in the Holland home. This brings us to May 30th of 2012, around 7:30 p.m. Brittney Wood grabbed a tote bag which held a change of clothes, a curling iron, and a few things that one might take for like an overnight trip. She informed her mother she was going to visit a friend named Courtney. The 19-year-old took off walking. Once she was out of her mother's view down the street, Brittany was picked up by her uncle, Donald Holland. This is the uncle by marriage. He is the husband of Wendy, who is her aunt.
Okay.
Okay. Donnie and Brittany had a unique relationship, according to relatives. They had a special bond. Donnie treated Brittany more like a sister than like a niece. If she needed money, he would give it to her. If she needed a ride, he would come pick her up. He seemed to be kind of there for her. You know what I'm saying? Like anything she needed, anything she wanted, like he was always there to help her out.
Yeah, and on the surface, that's not, totally abnormal for an aunt or uncle to have a really close connection with either their niece or nephew. They're always helping them out, and they kind of pal around. They just connect for some reason.
And those who knew Donnie said he was a very colorful character. Charismatic, outgoing, the kind of guy who made friends everywhere he went. Donnie was a big dude. He kind of reminds me of you, Dylan. He had the barrel chest.
Oh, wow.
Kind of the big shoulders, barrel chest. And he looked like what you would imagine the stereotypical biker guy might look like. He's got that goatee, that handlebar mustache.
Wow, he must have been really handsome if he reminds you of me.
No. He's not really my type.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I'm sure someone out there would find him attractive.
It's a hot take.
Yet, he had a soft voice. Folks said it didn't match up with his appearance. Donnie was a construction contractor in Fish River, known to be an incredibly hard worker. He and Wendy owned 2 acres and a nice 3-bedroom house. They were known to entertain often, hosting barbecues. Donnie was the kind of guy who made sure everyone was fed and having fun. So in that way, Dylan, he's a gracious host, kind of like you are.
Yeah, I love to have people over, friends, family, and make sure everyone eats good and it's good food. And, I'm the kind of person that gets, cleans the kitchen, make sure everyone's eating before I eat. I have to take an hour break after cooking all that. But I really enjoy that.
I know you do.
It's good times.
He took the kids camping, fishing, swimming, tubing. He had jet skis and liked to organize family outings. His nephew, Andrew Aiken, told AL.com that, quote, Donnie was a cool guy. At this time, Donnie had been staying with a friend in Styx River. Brittany accompanied Donnie to the house in Styx River, but then seemed to vanish into thin air. Brittany wasn't reported missing for 3 days until June the 2nd. And that is when law enforcement was finally contacted. Chessie said it wasn't unusual for her daughter to go several days without communication. Some days Brittany might call or text like 50 times, but then other days, usually when she was like hanging out with friends or whatever, she might not hear from Brittany at all.
So it's not totally unusual for her to get an overnight bag, go kick it with someone, go, hang out, do whatever she likes, and not contact her mom for, say, 48 hours or so.
Right.
Okay.
Chessie phoned Courtney, Brittany's friend, but she hadn't seen Wood. And remember, Brittany said, I'm going to hang out with my friend Courtney. And Courtney hadn't seen or heard from Brittany.
Well, and as a parent, that would be a definite, your first red flag. Your child told you they were going somewhere and they didn't. So then you wonder, were they trying to go there and they didn't make it? Or did something happen? Or were they lying to me and they were doing something I wasn't aware of?
Right. The day before Brittany was reported missing by her father and stepmother, her uncle Donnie Wood was found on June 1st in a rural area about a mile from a main road. Donnie had been staying with a friend named Jennifer Gonzalez Moore in Styx River. It was about 45 minutes after he left his wife Wendy and the friend Jennifer that they found him sitting in his SUV, which was running, by the way, near Fish River, with a gunshot wound to the back of his head, just behind the ear. The SUV is parked kind of facing the river, and at the point when they find him, he's still alive.
So this is self-inflicted.
Seemingly so.
Yeah, by all accounts.
But we'll get into that.
Yes.
Before calling 911, his wife Wendy erased 4 text messages from Donnie's phone. Jennifer contacted a detective named Winberg with the Baldwin County Sheriff's Office to report that Donnie had attempted suicide. This detective, Winberg, had been speaking with Donnie during the early months of the child sex abuse investigation. He arrived at the scene, and by then paramedics were moving Donnie from the SUV. His wife Wendy kept asking, "Where's Brittany? Where's Brittany?" to Donnie, which the detective noted.
Yeah, as he's he's barely clinging on to life. He has a
Yes.
gunshot wound to his head, very serious matter. So he's probably not really aware or able to talk, I would imagine, right?
Right. I should also mention before this, Donnie Holland had failed a polygraph exam that was administered by the sheriff's office regarding the sex abuse case.
So from the detective's perspective, he's been investigating this sex abuse case that was started by the admissions of Scott Wood
Yes.
of what was on the computer, and that he thinks other people have been abusing this 13-year-old that's in the home he's connected to, right?
Yes.
And now he's found one of his main, maybe not suspect, but one of the main people he's been discussing this sexual abuse case with.
Well, no, he definitely is a suspect.
Well, he is okay. He's found him at a scene with what's being reported as a self-inflicted gunshot wound, and he's barely clinging to life.
Once Donnie was hospitalized, each time Wendy Holland would ask her husband, "Where's Brittany?" her sister Sonia noticed a change in Donnie's vitals and brain activity, but he passed away shortly after. Donnie wasn't able to tell anyone what had happened to him or Brittany before he died. Many wondered if Donnie had committed suicide to avoid an impending arrest and subsequent trial that might follow. Others speculated that Donnie had been responsible for Brittany's disappearance, and some thought Donnie had not shot himself at all, believing the angle behind his ear was very unusual, with a trajectory kind of downward to the jaw area, and that Wendy and Jennifer might have killed him before staging the scene. It appeared almost like an execution-style hit.
That's a very strange place to try to shoot yourself in the head.
Most people are not going to shoot themselves that far behind, like almost in the back of the head,
Right.
right?
Yeah. So it's almost like something the mob would do, right? The small caliber,
Yes.
right behind the ear, and it seems very strange. Most people either put the gun to their temple or they put the gun under their chin. Okay,
Right.
that's what you typically see.
Or like in their mouth.
People
roof
do
of the
not,
mouth,
yeah,
kinda upward.
they
Yeah.
do not get into these strange, awkward angles where if you were just holding something up to your head would be uncomfortable. It's just not natural. It's not what most people would try to do.
Right. So that was definitely odd for most people involved in the case. Detective Winberg was supposed to meet with Donnie Holland on the day he shot himself. Winberg thinks Holland likely knew he was going to be arrested. Later, investigators will conclude that Donnie Holland had shot himself with a gun registered to Brittney Wood. It was a small caliber .25 handgun. According to some reports, Brittany carried the gun everywhere she went. Others brought up the question of why Brittany had recently gotten this handgun and why did she need it to protect herself.
Well, if someone's never had a gun and then all of a sudden they have one, not only do they get a small pistol, that's not a big deal, but they start carrying it with them at all times, keeping it close at hand. That's a considerable change of behavior, in my opinion.
Yeah, you're right. Brittany's cell phone battery was found inside Donnie Holland's truck, but at the time, law enforcement didn't know this was her battery or that she was even missing. Because remember, this is on June 1st, and Brittany is not reported missing until the next day. So at the time they find this battery, they don't really know anything about it.
So she's reported missing 3 days after her mother last saw her walk down
Yes.
the road, and she knows that she was picked up by Donald Holland, right, her uncle. And so this would be 2 days she's been missing, and then this happens with Mr. Holland, this alleged suicide.
Yes.
And then the next day, on the third day, she's reported missing.
That is an exact timeline, Dylan.
Yeah, but this is that's the point I want to make. So it's very strange. She's not already even been reported missing yet, Brittany.
Right.
Okay, But they're in the hospital in Donnie's last moments, and it was Wendy
Yes.
that was asking him, "Where's Brittany?" Right? And supposedly getting this fluctuations in his vitals, and like it was making, like, even though he couldn't communicate, he was registering the question, and it was causing, his blood pressure to go up or heartbeat or whatever. So it's very strange to me that Wendy's there in the hospital asking him where's Brittany is when he shot himself.
Well, it is, and other relatives that were in the hospital room were also, I'm kind of
Like,
confused.
why is she asking him that?
Yeah,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
Eventually, data will show that Brittany's cell phone last pinged near the house where she was last known to be, where she had stayed with Donnie Holland. Investigators found her tote bag and personal items at that house, but there were no signs of foul play at the home. They didn't find signs of a struggle. There didn't seem to be any, blood stains. Nothing that would make them think something had happened to Brittany.
So yeah, the Holland household was recorded or was in the Styx River area in Alabama, right?
Well, she was staying over at Donnie's at the Jennifer Gonzalez Moore's house.
Oh, okay.
So, and details are kind of sketchy about this. I am assuming, which what happens when you assume stuff, but I'm assuming that perhaps Donnie wasn't allowed to be in maybe his home because of the allegations and had to go stay with a friend.
Okay.
Possibly. And maybe that's why they were staying at this woman's house.
Okay, that makes sense. See, that's why I keep backtracking. It's so tricky.
Well, it is tricky. And like I said, I'm not 100% certain. I'm just kind of guessing that maybe that's why they were staying at this other woman's house. Because, they were investigating this. They're going to pull the kids out of the house. So that kind of thing's happening. That's all I could imagine was going on. So Brittany's cell phone showed some outgoing calls between multiple people between 11 p.m. and 11:40 on the night of May 30th. The last known message was sent out at 1:47 a.m. Then there was no more activity on Brittany's cell phone. With Brittany missing, there's a lot going on. Did Brittany kill Donnie, then take off? Or did he do something to her and then turn the gun on himself? These questions swirled. People wanted to know, were these two situations related? Did Donnie's suicide and Brittany's disappearance have anything to do with each other?
Right. Or is this suicide tied to these, sexual abuse allegations? There's just so much going on in like, just like a week period during the story.
According to his wife, Wendy, Donnie had talked about taking his life the night before. Donnie was suspected of heading up what has been described as the worst child sex ring in Alabama. So between June 6th and 7th, there was a search conducted of the Waterworld Road near Styx River, an area where Brittany was last seen. But the search resulted in, there was nothing. They didn't find anything. By June 11th, the Class Kids Foundation assisted in organizing search efforts. And by the 13th of June, more than 70 volunteers gathered to search a 5-mile area of Styx River. After several weeks of searches with no new leads, a $1,500 reward was offered for information leading to finding Brittney Wood. During this time, the sex abuse allegations are also being investigated. A sex crimes investigation unit and social workers interviewed Wendy and Donnie's children, along with other relatives regarding the abuse. Their youngest daughter, the Hollands' youngest daughter, admitted that her parents had been abusing her. And when law enforcement asks the older daughter about it, she agrees. She's like, yeah, I think it's true. And they say, well, why do you think that? And she says, because I've also been abused.
Yeah, it's just so many victims tied up in this. It's like it keeps snowballing. It's like, okay, we have a report on this 13-year-old in the home being abused. That's horrible. And the more they look into it and the more they question, it's almost like everyone connected, any young people or anybody connected to this family is like, yeah, well, I was abused as well.
Well, we're going to get into all of that, Dylan.
Oh, my God.
Thanks for the spoiler alert.
Fucking pisses me off so bad.
I mean, imagine you've got that image of the iceberg peeking out of the water, right? And it's like the more they chip away at the top of the iceberg, the more this story goes down, down,
It gets
down,
bigger.
deeper and deeper. Exactly. Several other members of the family were implicated, including Wendy's twin sister, Mindy Kent, her husband, Dustin Kent, and others. It was something that had been going on for generations. I mean, there were many layers to the story, Dylan. Allegedly, Donnie determined which adult got to spend time with a certain child, how long they could spend, and when this encounter would take place. It was so far-reaching within the family, it involved Brittany's older brother Derek, Donnie's son, Donnie Jr., and friends of the Hollands. Children were rotated from family member to family member. To put it into perspective, it was just 2 weeks after these children were interviewed that Brittany went missing.
Okay. Jesus. Yeah, I just don't know. I mean, I just feel for a victim that's in this environment. Not only do they have an abuser, one abuser, which is horrible, it's like everyone's in on it. You know, it's like every adult around them
Every trusted adult
is in on it. It's like you don't even have anywhere to turn for help. And it's been done. I just continue. I'll have more thoughts later. I don't want to say anything that is in your story.
Facebook messages revealed that Brittney Wood and one of the victims had a conversation on May 27th, days before Brittany went missing, in which they discussed the abuse. The female minor relative confided in Brittany that she had been raped by 3 of their male relatives. This was critical information that Brittany wanted to share with police when she met with them. On June 10th, a torso was found on a beach in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi, and investigators thought it could be Brittany. The water current might be able to take a body from the Alabama area up to Mississippi. When the body is first inspected, it is believed to belong to a Caucasian female between 15 and 22, but eventually it was determined not to be Brittany. Cadaver dogs were brought in and searched around Donnie's home. The 16-year-old rape victim, who had messaged Brittany on Facebook, spoke to investigators. She told law enforcement that the sexual abuse had started as early as she could remember, while she was still in diapers.
Jesus.
She didn't understand why these things were happening because they were people she loved and trusted. She couldn't understand why her family had done this. As she got older, she was forced to participate in group sex with many different family members, also friends, and sometimes strangers.
So they've been doing this so long to these victims, they just think this is what normal life is. They don't realize that this is way beyond normal and very horrible and dysfunctional. And you don't only have one abuser, which, like I said, is bad. There are literally reports of them pimping out the children at hand to strangers or to just taking them places and letting people do things to them. They're children, they're family. I don't know.
This victim said sometimes there was a huge circle with as many as a dozen adults who spent the whole night switching up the children. I mean, these are some very sick, demented, fucked up people. That's the only way we can describe it, right?
Definitely.
On June 19th of 2012, the uncle, Scott Wood, and Dustin Kent, who happened to be, as I mentioned, Wendy's twin sister Mindy's husband, they were arrested on charges of sexual abuse. Despite the allegations of child sex abuse, law enforcement insisted that Brittany's disappearance was not tied to the sex ring. So I don't know how they can insist that's not the case, but they are denying there's any connection.
It's one thing to say we don't have any evidence at this point to prove that it's connected, but there's always that possibility. But it's kind of odd to me for them to insist that we definitely know it's not connected when you don't know where Brittany is, you haven't found Brittany's remains or anything like that. And we also have to remember that Brittany is a really strong-willed person. She's had previous abuse, someone outside of this family, outside of this these sex ring allegations, and she had the guts to face her accuser in court and testify against them. So I think if someone thought Brittany knew something, they would know that Brittany is not afraid to do the hard thing and testify or tell what she knows. So I think we have to remember that.
Others couldn't help but believe Brittany's disappearance had something to do with the impending investigation. Although Donnie was said to be the ringleader, others said it was actually his wife Wendy who was really running things. It was speculated that she was the one who might have had something to do with Brittany's disappearance and her husband's death. Over time, there were a lot of theories developed. One theory was that Brittany ran away after being abused by her uncle or after shooting him herself. When this information started coming out, people went wild with theories. I mean, they're kind of all over the place. The prosecutor, Nikki Patterson, will later say, quote, "Pretty much everyone in this extended family was having sex with one another and having sex with the children." A solid case was fully developed over the coming months. Members of Brittany's family were arrested. The children were placed into foster care or with trusted relatives who were not involved in the sex ring. By the end of July, 11 members of this family had been charged with rape, sodomy, and production of child pornography, among other things. The men arrested included Brittany's brother, Derek Wood, her uncle, Randall Scott Wood, Dustin Kent, which is her uncle by marriage, her step-cousin, Donald Paul Holland Jr., and a relative by marriage named James Coomba, and two family friends, William Brownlee and Nelson Morgan. There were also women charged: Brittany's own mother, Chessie Wood, Brittany's aunt Wendy and her sister Mindy, and Wendy's best friend, Jennifer Gonzalez Moore. Brittany's mother was very vocal in the media. She believed the sex crimes were related to her daughter's disappearance and that the stigma prevented organizations from helping to find Brittany. Chessie told the press there were innocent people and guilty people in this ring. Chessie, of course, shied away from talking about her own charges. It was alleged by Donnie Holland's daughter that her father, along with Chessie Wood, had abused her at Wood's home when she was between 8 to 10 years old. Chessie Wood was charged with 2 counts of sodomy, sex abuse on a child less than 12 years old, and she denied being involved.
So her charges come from a direct accusation by, what was her name, or the victim?
Well, I don't know her name because she's a minor.
Yeah, I think she may have been the original victim, 13-year-old victim. That's
Yes.
where it all started.
Yes.
Yeah, so she's alleging that her aunt, in essence, right,
Yes.
was in on the abuse with everyone else.
That's what she said, yes.
Yeah, I just can't. It's hard for me to even stay on point here and just contemplate the fact that you just named off like a group of 10 adults. 11 adults that are, some are family, some are not, and that they're all in on this.
That they're actively participating.
They're actively participating.
I know, it's hard. It's disgusting. The details that would emerge from this case were shocking and enough to make someone sick to their stomachs. A victim who was 13 years old at the time said at one point her father said they were going to the pet store and the child was excited. Instead, they drove to Dustin Kent's house where they picked him up and they headed to an industrial park where the father watched Kent rape the victim in the vehicle.
Okay.
I mean, this is the kind of shit that's going on.
Well, I mean, I don't know, religious or not, or whatever you are, if this is not an example of what we define as evil in this world, then I don't know what is.
Wendy and Donnie ran sex parties where children were abused. According to statements, the women involved, mostly Wendy and Mindy, and they were tasked with preparing the children for sex. This often included introducing them to toys, if you know what I mean.
So they're teaching the children how to have sex.
Yeah.
What you do, or they take the girl and say, this is what you do for the guy, right?
Yeah.
Or the boy.
I'm assuming. I don't even want to think about it.
But I mean, that's basically how it's laid out. They're teaching them because they're fucking little kids. and they wouldn't even know what to try to do if you talked them into trying it because they're just little.
It's a lot, okay? It's hard to talk about. Derek Wood, Brittany's brother, would later say he started having sex with Wendy Holland when he was 13. It seemed the pedophile ring was a product of generations of incestuous relationships. Many of the victims had gone on to become perpetrators in a cycle. It was said the defendants may have themselves been victims more than 30 years before their arrests. The trials began rather quickly in the abuse cases. Some people were able to delay their trial. Brittany's brother, Derek Wood, was indicted on charges of second-degree rape and second-degree sodomy. His victims were said to be between the ages of 12 to 16 years old at the time of the abuse. Derek's attorney was able to work out a deal with the prosecution where he would receive youthful offender status. It centered around the fact that he was being an abuser while he was a minor. He told the judge and prosecution that he thought it was normal, just something that went on in his family.
See, okay, so this has been ongoing. This didn't happen over a course of a couple of months. This is years, generational. The word generational is the part that disturbs me most. And some of these people tied to it have been raised in this environment, right? And they have been abused as long as they can remember, like your first thoughts when you're a little kid, when you first remember being 2 or 3 years old.
This has been going on since I was in diapers. That's
Since I was
one
in
of the victims
diapers.
said that.
Right? And then as they come of age and they get up older, and it's like everyone around them's doing it, if this is to be believed, then they just think this is normal. It's okay to do this. So that's where it gets tricky for me when you have someone who turns into an abuser, and this is so sweeping. This is a very particular type of situation. Can they be held accountable for their abuse later on when they thought this is just normal and they had been abused all their life? Is it the same, or is there any kind of a gray area in that for you personally, do you believe?
I don't know.
Because
Ask me later when I've processed it.
I mean, because oftentimes I'm like, you should know, we know that this happens. You've been abused. You've been a victim. You've been hurt.
But if that's all you've ever known,
your soul ripped out, then you should not ever want to do that to anyone else. But we know the statistics prove that oftentimes people do. And in this situation, the uniqueness of this situation, it's literally happened your entire life. Even if you talk to the other young people around you, it's happening to them. And all the adults are in on it. So you really don't realize that this is abnormal and so dysfunctional.
Well, the terms of his deal are sealed, but the most he could receive under the status was 3 years. And I don't know exactly how much time he served because it is sealed, Dylan. So there we go. While out on bond, Donald Paul Holland Jr. was ordered to wear an ankle monitor. And at some point, he got into a car chase with police and had a wreck. He removed the ankle monitor, but a few days later, he turned himself into police while he's awaiting trial.
Okay.
Yeah. By December, Chessie Wood is asking hunters to be on the lookout for Brittany in the wooded areas. She theorizes to press that Donald Holland was responsible for Brittany's disappearance, believing her daughter went to confront him when she vanished. Chessie also accused her sister Wendy of having knowledge of Brittany's whereabouts. In January of 2013, a candlelight vigil was held for Brittney Wood. Chessie was successful in delaying her trial. She kept telling the media she didn't have anything to do with the charges or the sex ring. She held true to saying that she wasn't guilty, but eventually made a deal with prosecutors to plead to a lesser charge of reckless endangerment, which was a misdemeanor. Chessie claimed she had no idea there was any kind of sex ring. A lot of people don't believe this woman, obviously. Her sisters, brother, son, they were all involved, and she was accused.
Yeah, I mean, if she is truly innocent, then she's in a very bad spot. I mean, this is very unfortunate circumstances to find yourself in because it just doesn't, it's not believable.
It's not a good look.
No.
Right?
It's not.
And oftentimes you're guilty by association. Perception is everything.
Yeah, and as far as I know, this story it did make national headlines, I'm sure. But as far as the local media go, regional media, this was every single day. This
Yes.
story was on the front page. It led the newscast. I mean, people could not stop talking about it for obvious reasons.
Brittney Wood Holland was found guilty in Baldwin County of sodomy, sexual torture, and sexual abuse of a minor. She received the harshest sentence, which was 219 years in prison. Wendy has refused to talk about Brittney Wood. She was also charged in Mobile County with additional charges. So this is another thing that I wanted to bring up, Dylan. Where they lived, the area is kind of split into two counties. There's Mobile County and Baldwin County.
Right.
And there seems to be like this river, this body of water that kind of separates. But you had abuse in both counties. And so there almost seemed to be some kind of back and forth. Like Mobile County didn't want to have to take these charges and have the story be like, oh, this happened in Mobile County.
Okay.
But Baldwin County maybe it's not as large, less population, probably not as many resources as Mobile County.
Less influence in the area.
So there's like kind of a little back and forth about, who's going to charge these people with what. But some of them were charged in both counties. Now, the prosecution tried to make a deal with her that she could get a lesser sentence if she told them where they could find Brittany's body. But Wendy said she wasn't interested and didn't want to comment on her niece's disappearance.
That's a strange answer, right?
It's a very strange answer.
How about I don't know anything? I didn't do anything to Brittany, so there's nothing I can tell you. Wouldn't that be a normal answer? But we can't. We could do a whole episode on this evil piece of shit right here, Wendy. She almost has been put forth like the ringleader of sorts of this abuse ring.
She has like a hollowness or an emptiness in her eyes. I mean, I know that probably sounds nuts, but if you see pictures or videos of this woman, there's just something about her that's like, I don't know. Like
it's cold.
She's a vast emptiness in that brain or behind those eyes. Like there's just this void. I don't know. I don't see how you could say I'm not going to comment on this unless you knew something.
Right.
Anyway, at her trial, Wendy's attorney berated one of the victims on the stand, comparing this child to George Costanza on Seinfeld, saying she was an outrageous liar.
Okay.
So I get everyone's entitled, to a fair trial, and you can have your defense attorney. There is just no way I could do that job and defend somebody who's this kind of piece of shit and berate a minor, a child, on the stand and tell them they're a liar. This kid probably doesn't even know who George Costanza is.
You're not only calling them a liar, you're calling them one of the most prolific liars of modern time, George Costanza. I mean, let's be honest. And here's a victim. You got to tear a victim down to try to prove your case. I know defense attorneys, it's a hard job, and it's everyone needs to be defended in the court of law and all that for the system to work. But sometimes I just don't know how they do it. It must be tough, and I'm sure they have moral qualms about what they do and don't do. I'm sure to still try to give someone a proper defense to the best of their abilities. It must be tough.
I have to say, I worked briefly for an attorney, and I say briefly because he was a piece of shit. Like, he was just a fucking horrible person and verbally abusive to his staff. Like, he was just a piece of work. And he had no qualms with defending somebody. I mean, he was like, as long as they're paying me, I'll say whatever.
Well,
I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess I have a bad taste after having worked briefly for this guy.
Yeah, and we're certainly not alleging that all defense attorneys are like that.
Definitely not.
And I'm sure even if their client is guilty, they still have to try to defend, and against the evidence or whatever's at hand. And I get that. I do. And I just don't know. Like I said, it must be a really tough job. honestly.
Well, some of them probably do have morals, and it's difficult for them, and then others are like Saul Goodman.
I would be the one like tanking my defense if it's someone who's just a super piece of shit and I think they're really guilty. I would just secretly tank it, which is obviously illegal
I
to
would,
do.
Yeah, I feel like I'd have to go work in like an ADA office or something. It would be an ADA or work in a district attorney's office or something. I think I could do criminal defense.
So everyone's been charged. Wendy got this 200 plus year sentence. These horrible crimes. A couple of them I had to even look up to even know what it was. You're talking about abuse with objects. You're talking about, just anything you could imagine. And, but she still
Please don't try to imagine it.
refuses
Horrible.
to concede or give any information or help anyone in any form or fashion.
Man, I hope that bitch is eating fruit cocktail off the prison floor. Like in Chappelle's show. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anywho, Mindy Holland, her twin, was given a 40-year sentence for her involvement, 20 years for the sexual abuse, and 20 years for sodomy in Mobile County. Dustin Kent testified that he participated in a 6-way sexual encounter with Wendy, his wife Mindy, a teen victim, and others. He said he first saw Wendy having sex with a teen victim in October of 2011. Dustin Kent told or testified at the trial it wasn't like it was her first time.
Okay.
He pled guilty to sodomy and incest in Baldwin County, then guilty to sodomy and rape in Mobile County. Randall Scott Wood made a plea deal. He wanted to spare the victims from having to testify. Wood was charged with sodomy, rape, and child enticement, receiving a 15-year sentence. William Brownlee, who was a family friend, was charged with rape, sodomy, and child abuse, and he was given 20 years in prison. Now, law enforcement felt Brittany had been a victim in this case. Their top theory was that she had likely fallen victim to her aunt and uncle because they wanted to keep her from talking to authorities.
Well, like I said, they know Brittany is strong-willed. She has guts. She's already proven that she's not afraid to go all the way in a situation like this and tell the truth in public, in court. So there's no doubt about what she is capable of as a very strong young woman, incredible person. So, I mean, that theory kind of hits home with me.
I couldn't find information about James Kumba's sentence, Nelson, I believe his name was Nelson Morgan, and the Jennifer Gonzalez Moore. I tried to find what their sentencing was, but I didn't see that available. Otherwise, I would have reported it. It seems that most of these people took a plea agreement of some sort.
Right. So, I mean, it's not hard to imagine why you would imagine or why investigators would think that Brittany is connected to them and that all this has something to do with her disappearance. She's the last person seen with is Donald Holland, her uncle. Picked her up from her mom's, down the street from her mom's house. All this other stuff's already happened. The allegation of sexual abuse, this huge investigation, that is, all kinds of people involved around Brittany and her connection to her uncle, and then she just disappears. I mean, it seems to me like it has to be connected. I mean, I just don't. What are the odds that some other random violence or someone else, random person, did something to Brittany when she's connected to this group and all this other shit's going on? I think it's improbable.
It's pretty slim to none.
Yes.
So get this, Dylan. One of the victims accused an uncle of sexual abuse back in 2008, and social workers checked into the complaint but said they couldn't substantiate it. So had they been able to uncover abuse, it perhaps could have saved other victims.
Well, yeah, considering this abuse is far-reaching and so many victims, upwards of 30? Am I wrong on that?
No, I believe that was the number.
30, 31?
Family, the children of these folks, and then family friends that were involved, and I guess bringing their children into the fold.
This is
There's a
what
lot.
could be described as sex parties, orgies, literally pimping out these kids, your
Dustin
kids,
Kent
other people's
described
kids.
it as a 6-way.
A 6-way.
I mean, I don't even want to know what that is.
Creeps and strangers coming from all over to participating in this sick, disgusting acts. I swear to God, you should go in there with a gun, full clip, 15, 16, 18 shots, whatever it is. I'm not a gun guy. And put one in every one of these pieces of shit's head. I'm sorry. Every fucking one of them.
I'm going to finish my story now. Chessie told the media, quote, "We as a family do not see how she had the means to run," meaning Brittany. "We've covered every friend, every one of them accounted for. I mean, if she had to run because she's scared, I would really believe that she would have brought her daughter with her." On October 8th of 2019, Kloss Kids continued to conduct searches for Brittany in the area around the Styx River house, and they used some radar equipment. There was a concrete slab that they wanted to investigate around there. Chessie Wood was there, but she didn't take place in the search. And they brought in a film crew from London that recorded the search for that docuseries, Monster in the Shadows. There are still ongoing efforts to find Brittany. Unfortunately, nothing has come from any of these efforts to find the young woman. In 2019, Brittany's brother Derek was charged with stealing a tow truck in Mobile. It has been reported that Peyton, Brittany's daughter, lives with her biological father Andy and his grandmother. In 2018, 8-year-old Peyton celebrated her birthday and said about her mom, "I would give her a balloon. I can't give her a hug. I wish I could. I miss her."
God.
Peyton is a regular kid. She's described as being full of energy. She reportedly likes school, crafts, making little art projects, and dancing. It's just really sad that this young mother has been missing all these years.
Yeah, and she loved children. She loved her child. She had a natural way with children, everyone said. She was very, very close with her mother. They were like, best friends as well as mom and daughter. So she's just not the type of person to just run off and walk away from her life. I think it's certain that something bad happened to Brittany, and maybe one day the truth will come out.
It's just one of the worst cases that we've ever covered.
Yeah,
honestly.
I mean, it is. I mean, honestly, it is very horrible, and it's hard that you don't even think it's real. You think it's some sick movie
This is
concept
like something
or something.
out of a horror movie.
Yes, definitely.
It's the most depraved case, honestly. I don't know. I don't even have any words for these people.
No, and that's certainly why we've had a bit more, which is, it's always bad stuff we talk about, but we've had a bit of a somber tone. There's not really room to work in anything or feel funny about any of this. And it's just very sad. But, the story we feel must be told, right?
Well, there's always hope that someone out there knows something. And maybe the more Brittany's in the news and the spotlight, a person might feel compelled to come forward and share what they know.
Yeah, and I certainly suggest watching that docuseries, Monsters in the Shadow, just you get a taste of some of the people involved, and you really have some conflicting thoughts as you watch this. You're not sure what to believe in certain parts of it.
Absolutely, Dylan. When I was watching the docuseries for research, I told you that I wasn't, I guess, 100% a fan of like how it was filmed or how they laid it out. It's a little disconjointed, and they kind of flip back and forth between time periods. I kind of like things that are in order. That's the way my brain works.
Right.
So for me, there were times that I was kind of like, okay, this is sort of confusing, or can they, they're not really giving me a whole lot of details on this one thing. I need to know more about it. But overall, you thought the documentary was well done. It's a 3-parter.
Well, I just for laying out all this information, it's a very complicated story. I'm sure you may feel this way as you listen to this episode. Heather always tries to, get a big story, lay it out properly, but it's confusing. I mean, there's really parts of it you could go over twice just to make sure you have it right. But I think it's worth watching, and I think just you can kind of, I don't know, get to meet some of the people involved, and there's some other, a few little interesting tidbits of information in there to just make you wonder. And it always makes you wonder what really happened to Brittany.
Absolutely. Well, Dylan, thank you for participating in today's case. I
Yes.
know it was tough for you.
Yeah, this sucks. It's just horrible. Just think about those poor little victims, those poor kids, and just this extended abuse like this. It just like rips my soul out. It's hard to even contemplate. But thank you, Heather, for the story. It's a rough story, but it had to be told. And thank everyone for listening. Right?
Yeah. So today, as I mentioned before, my main resource was Monsters in the Shadow, the docuseries, a 3-part docuseries, which you can find on Peacock, and also news articles. There really haven't been any books or anything like that written about this case. It's still pretty new. I'm sure someone will cover this in a true crime book at some point. But a lot of newspaper articles. AL, which is I guess like an Alabama-based newspaper, AL.com. They had a lot of reporting on this, as did many of the local news stations in and around Mobile.
Yeah. And so next week we will continue on Mountain Murders. We will continue our trip into Alabama. This was the first story of that month of Alabama we're going to do. And that was a doozy. So we'll see what Heather comes up with next week. And then you can join us in our midweek. We're back to our normal true crime show.
That is
Or true crime news.
Yes, Dylan.
Sorry.
Yes. If you have any thoughts, feedback, or want to recommend a case, you can always hit us up at mountainmurderspodcast@gmail.com. Find us on social media. We are on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and look forward to hearing from you guys. Have a great week.